Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever time you are listening to our Teacher's Lab podcast. Today, my partner Marciel and I, Gabriel, will discuss the particularities regarding teaching English to teenagers and adults. Teaching is not easy at all, and each age group brings with it inherent particularities that each teacher must deal with in their daily classroom practices. In this podcast, our focus is on teenagers and adults who are embarking on learning the English language. There are some fields of interest in which each of these worlds have its characteristics, and we teachers must take them into consideration. The first of these is autonomy. As we can imagine, adults are more responsible and generally know what they want, while teenagers are still in a transformation process that involves several aspects, mainly mental and physical. Therefore, it's necessary to pay attention to the activities that can be used in each of these groups. With adults, in activities that require the formation of pairs or groups, for example, we can let them make their choices without any major problems. With teenagers, we need to closely manage these choices to make the most of the activity in question, as we need to avoid undesirable unions which would generate conflicts of interest and a lot of mess. We also don't need to worry so much about needs that adults may have, as they are able to verbalize their desires and demands, which doesn't happen so much with teenagers, as we often need to pay attention to possible signs of these needs due to the shame of expressing themselves in the environment of the class. Regarding learning itself, teenagers' attention spans are very short-lived. After all they want when seeing their classmates is to catch up on the week's topics, and the class ends up taking a backseat if it's not designed in a way that is dynamic and with activities that spark their interest, while being short in duration. Generally with games, questions related to young people's daily lives, and some place to spark interest. With adults, it's possible to maintain interest for a longer time, working on more complex content which allows for a greater depth of theory with less need for fixation exercises and activities that hold attention for longer. Another important factor that must be considered when teaching English is anxiety. If the teenager in question does not have problems with shyness or any other difficulty socializing, the initiative will appear and the activities will become more fluid as long as it is fun for them. With adults, this can be more difficult as it's an environment that has not been part of their daily lives for some time, and this can cause some inhibition or anxiety when responding to the activities proposed in the classroom, mainly writing and speaking, especially when learning a language such as English, for example, which, depending on the adult's lack of contact, can be quite intimidating at first. It's up to the teacher to observe this type of behavior and encourage the student's participation by showing that it's common to make certain mistakes, that there are different levels and a beginner needs to make a lot of mistakes to progress to a higher level. Now let's hear some more relevant features to teaching teenagers and adults with my friend Marciel.
Hello, everybody. When it comes to motivation, adults come out ahead. Think about it. When adults decide to study, it is due to some specific objective that they have established themselves. Whether it is the desire to learn English, take a course for work, or even live outside the country. All these possibilities generate specific interests, which make motivation come together and make studying easier. With teenagers, it's different. They are still dependent on their parents and are in regular schools. In these environments, English is just an extra workload for them to reach the goal of approval. It is therefore necessary for the teacher to be able to make these students see the world of possibilities with the study of the English language, illustrating some some of the different reasons that can bring this stimulus, such as being the most spoken language in the world, having the greatest amount of classics of world literature, having a simple grammar which makes learning something that is normally tiring much easier, as well as the possibility of better understanding popular culture, which allows them not to depend on inaccurate translations and to be active in understanding the original content. Let's talk about discipline. It is easy to see that teenagers are more difficult to manage than adults. After all, adults are adults. There is always the possibility of conflicts occurring due to differences of opinion on matters that encourage a more critical reading of some guiding texts. But once the flames are put out, peace is restored, and the class moves on with the following content. In short, you can spend more time teaching than managing behaviors. With teenagers, it's more difficult to maintain silence, attention, and focus when necessary, as there always seems to be something more interesting to talk about during class between the small groups of friends formed and the more complicated ones, those in the last rows of the classrooms. With this in mind, it's necessary to make clear the activities that will be proposed and with that objectives. Being fun and short, as mentioned in the topic on learning, so that students realize the importance of absorbing the content well and not ignoring their homework, which are essential for better retention of classes. If discipline is something that must be followed and demanded, then we can imagine another important aspect in teaching, which is the relationship with students. When it comes to teenager, the teacher tends to have a more energetic, energetic and corrective approach, given the common need to maintain the order and silence necessary to be able to teach with fluidity and general understanding. In this case, the teacher needs to have the ability to manage these behaviors, or they may end up losing their calm, changing their voice in a stressful situation and overdoing it. In relation to adults, the relationship is more regular and stable. If with teenagers, the teacher acts more like a tutor who may suffer rejection due to behavioral demands. With adults, this relationship is lighter and calmer, as both are well aware of their roles in the classroom and accepting rare exceptions. There will be disagreements, and when there are when there are, A rational dialogue is enough and both will return to normality. Finally, we must consider each person's life experience. Adults have decades of experience, which contributes greatly to facilitating teaching. With a quick understanding of everyday situations, with more comprehensive knowledge, and their own opinions and ideas, and all this makes the teacher more comfortable in sharing their own experience as a plan of action for classes and even to relax the atmosphere a little. Teenagers, on the other hand, have a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and curiosity. Perfect conditions for learning. In this way, a skilled teacher may be able to awaken a thirst for knowledge in these students at the beginning of their school life. Despite all, this, Despite all these differences, the main considerations and the practices will remain the same. Learning must be interesting and fun, with authentic materials and always taking advantage of students' prior knowledge because regardless the age, the relationship between teacher and student must always be one of exchange. Both always learn from this interaction. Thank you very much.